Hey there, EB here from Colorado, doing the Anything But Bland weekly update out here skiing with Renee and our friend Rob Lapine. Not much snow out here. It's been since 1977 since they've had this little amount of snow. And I talked to a local friend of mine who told me that what's going to end up happening is because there's no base, they usually have about a 36 to 48-inch base that's ice, so that when the snow melts in the spring, you still have that icy base and they can groom the snow. Because there's no base, and I mean, you literally see ground at many different points on runs, and you see grass coming up, there's rocks. When the weather gets warm, and we were skiing in almost 40-degree weather today, it melts the snow. There is no base. So in 1977, I think they had to close the slopes here in Snowmass, where I am. I'm in Aspen, Colorado, in Snowmass and Highlands. They had to close the slopes in the middle of February. We're told that they're possibly going to have to do that in March, and I was supposed to come back in March, so we'll see. I am going to attempt to do this update off my phone. What I end up doing is I make notes. I have a note section in my phone where I have a weekly update section, and every time I hear something on the news or I read something, I jot down a little skinny of something to remind me to talk. So let's get started. I have been saying for the better part of a year that I think democracy is in a fragile state right now, and there is a distinct possibility that it's bending to the point where it may break. I personally think that democracy has been forever broken with two of the main things that have happened over the past couple of weeks. One is the arrest of and charging of Don Lemon and another African-American journalist. The First Amendment is the most important, one of our most important amendments. That's why it was first, the freedom of association, freedom of speech. And there's no question that many times journalists are in situations where the people who are actors are doing unlawful activity, but the journalists are either filming it or writing about it, and they have immunity protection. What's really troubling in this Don Lemon matter is they tried to bring an arrest warrant against him 2 weeks ago, and a federal judge threw that out. And then it was appealed by the Department of Justice to the respective federal court of appeals, where the charges were brought. And they also affirmed the lower court's dismissal of the charges based on Don Lemon's First Amendment right. But they kept on shopping around. This time they finally impaneled a grand jury who returned an indictment. And so now Don Lemon is charged. He was released on his own recognizance, but the Justice Department only wanted him limited to being in Minnesota and New York during the term of his pretrial release. The judge said, no, you're free to go. The second thing that has happened is the search warrant that was executed in the Fulton County election office in connection with the 2020 election. Why is that so troubling? Because you're going after the vote. And Trump is telegraphing that he knows he's going to lose the midterm elections, and that he's now confiscating voting machines. And he's also making the bold suggestion, which some House members, Republicans, are picking up on, that they should nationalize elections in certain blue states where Trump thinks that there's a problem in reality, where he knows that House members are going to lose, Republican House members and possibly some senators. And the reason that that's important is when you start arresting the press and you take away free and fair elections. It's amazing that the 2024 election that he was elected in, he has no criticisms to that. He has no criticisms whatsoever. It amazingly clean election. But now all of a sudden, 2 years later, it's going to go back to the way it was in 2020. He says when he believes the election was stolen when Joe Biden won, even though he told his Attorney General Robert Barr, I know I lost the election. It's starting, folks. This is the problem that you have when you have a president that is not curbed by the court system, meaning the Supreme Court. The lower courts and the appellate courts have ruled against Trump over 80% of the time, but the Supreme Court has ruled in his favor over 60% of the time. And that's because of Alito and Clarence Thomas are controlling that court. It's no longer Justice John Roberts' court. He could call himself Chief Justice. He has no more power than Ketanji Brown Jackson or Sotomayor at this point. It's really Alito and Thomas's court. The United States shot down an Iranian drone that aggressively approached one of its aircrafts. And the Ayatollah said that the minute that happens, a regional war is going to start. Fortunately, that has not happened so far, and I hope it doesn't. But it's a powder keg. And the fact that we have our armada over there and a significant amount of warships is not good. Again, Trump says that elections should be nationalized, take control from the states. This is such an anti-Republican concept. Remember, the Republicans want to leave healthcare to the states. They want to leave FEMA and other things to the states. So it goes against the 10th Amendment that everything should be reserved to the states. Everything that Republicans have said since the beginning of this administration, the second term with DOJ, eliminating federal agencies and leaving it all up to the states. Now, all of a sudden, the Republicans are getting behind Trump and saying that elections should be nationalized. At this point, folks, the Republicans have no core principles left. They don't stand for anything. The MAGA stood for not getting ourselves entangled in foreign wars and foreign battles. That's clearly not as what has happened since 8 countries have been bombed in Trump's first year of his second term. Raphael Warnock, who's the senator from Georgia, head of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, said there's nothing Donald Trump can do to stop what's coming in the midterms. He knows he can't win fair and square, and that's why he's trying to seize control of the elections and confiscate the voting machines and intimidate a lot of these Democratic election officials in these various states. Kristi Noem finally pronounced that Homeland Security officers in Minneapolis and in other cities will now be issued body cameras, and they will have to wear them. They don't have to have identification, and they are still able to be masked. But the fact that they have to wear body cameras is a good thing. The whole election search warrant in Fulton County was rife with problems. Why do I say that? Because Tulsi Gabbard, who was the director of national intelligence, that's a national intelligence problem dealing with spies and international agencies, whether you deal with Mossad or other European countries' investigative agencies. She accompanied the FBI in the execution of the search warrant. No cabinet official ever does that. More importantly and more concerning is that during that raid where the voting machines were confiscated, she called President Trump, and President Trump spoke to some of the investigating FBI officers. That's just too much, too close. That's Trump controlling these investigations, letting everybody know that he wants all of these people charged, whether it's going to be Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State for Georgia, or other election officials, even Brian Kemp, who's the Republican governor of Georgia, who has said that there was no fraud in the 2020 election. Tulsi Gabbard's a major concern. As you recall, during her confirmation hearings, she got in by the skin of her teeth. Even Republicans voted against her. She's a conspiracy theorist from the get-go, just like J.D. Vance is, according to the chief of staff, Susie Wilds. She said he's been a conspiracy theorist for 10 years. That's Susie Wilds' words, not Eric Bland's. So I think it's a problem that we have to deal with. That people are going to have to start standing up and getting ready to fight for the right to have a vote in the midterm elections. The whole Epstein 3 million document data dump is rife with problems. I say that because Todd Blanche, the second command at the Department of Justice was the one who announced that there was going to be no more documents coming out about the Epstein case, no investigations, no follow-up dealing with some of the things that came out. And especially Ghislaine Maxwell dropped the bombshell. She alleged that 29 of Jeffrey Epstein's buddies had cut secret deals to avoid prosecution. Harold Lutnick, who is the Commerce Secretary, Prince Andrew, Jay-Z, and Weinstein all have been implicated in the Epstein scandal. The Justice Department has said it's taken down Epstein-related files that may have had victim information. Tons of victim information was released. We know that the Clintons now are going to have to testify before Congress. They avoided being held in criminal contempt. James Comer, who is an absolute rabid partisan Republican who has used the Oversight Committee to basically fetch the water for Donald Trump, wants to go after the Clintons hard. It's amazing that he wants to question Bill and Hillary about the Epstein, but he doesn't want to question Donald Trump now that we know that Trump has lied, has been on Epstein's plane at least 8 to 12 times. And even though he is going to sue Trevor, I forget his last name, he was on the Grammys, who said that Trump was on Epstein Island, even though it was in a joke. Trump suing him for $10 billion. This is Donald Trump bringing lawsuits left and right, screams about lawfare, but he's the one who brings the lawsuits. But it turns out that in these documents, Donald Trump has been to Epstein's home. Is that his home in New York City or somewhere else? We don't know. Jeffrey Epstein appears to have had a secret child 15 years ago, according to a bombshell email sent by Sarah Ferguson, who is Andrew Mountbatten's, formerly known as Prince Andrew of Windsor Castle. She congratulated him on a child that he had. His nightmare continues. There was an article today again that Don Trump visited the sick pedo's home before announcing his presidential run, according to a memo from the latest file dump. Now, we know that Donald Trump said that he cut off all ties with Jeffrey Epstein in 2007 and 2008. Now we're starting to see memos that that's not true and that Trump kept in touch with him all the way up to his first term in 2016. Trump is mentioned more than 1,000 times in the 3 million Jeffrey Epstein documents that were released. While some of the references are benign, others include newly disclosed unverified sexual assault claims against Trump, as well as fresh details about how some of Epstein's victims described their interactions with the future president. We don't know whether these are true or false. They're not going to be investigated. And that's really the problem here, is that there needs to be some background to put these documents and timelines in context. Stephen Miller, who is really the Darth Vader of Trump's administration, I think he's getting him in tons of trouble in foreign policy and as connection with ICE. He now admits that the agents who killed Alex Preddy may not have followed actual protocol. Be careful what you ask for. You may get it. You've heard that phrase used 1,000 times in our lives. Well, the Supreme Court cleared the way this week for California's new voting map. Remember, Trump started this with Texas trying to change Democratic seats into Republican seats by gerrymandering the districts. Well, California had a vote in November, and their voters said by more than a 65% or 55% vote that they wanted to change the map. And that's exactly what has happened in California, and it was held up by the United States Supreme Court. Attorney General Todd Blanche said Sunday that the federal investigators are unable to investigate these tips about Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and therefore they're not going to do it. Blanche told host Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union that some of the tips are anonymous and relied upon secondhand information, which he says that it's nothing that can be investigated. At this point now, only 30% of U.S. adults approve how Trump is handling his job. That's down from 40% in the fall and down from 55% when he was inaugurated last January. By more than 2 to 1, Americans say his administrative actions have made America worse than expected rather than better. Support for Trump's agenda has only weakened. Only 27% of the Americans now say they support most of his policies and plans, which is down from 35% when he returned from office. The Pew Foundation found that his decline came entirely from Republicans, whose support now has dropped from 67% to 56%. It's amazing that Preddy, the Civil Rights Division of the federal government, is going to investigate him. It's going to leave the investigation open, which is a convenient tool for shutting states down if they're going to push for investigations. Essentially, what's going to happen is, a former U.S. attorney said, when the states come around sniffing the federal government's going to say, you can't come around here, we're handling this. Trump has said, in 2024 that he never was on Epstein's plane. We now know that he's been on it at least 8 to 12 times. The files included an FBI form that detailed a complaint from a woman who accused Trump of raping her when she was 13 years old. I doubt that was true, but it's in there. The concession that the Clintons are going to have to testify before Congress in depositions, I think, is a big one. I think they're going to be asked some very humiliating questions. I think certainly Bill is, because of his womanizing background. Now, Trump loves to talk about Vladimir Putin and how he has a great relationship with him and that Putin respects him. You remember last week, Trump announced with great fanfare, I negotiated a temporary winter truce of 1 week because it's so cold in Ukraine and Russia. We're going to just stop the bombing. And Putin agreed to it. He killed 5 people the night of the agreement that he agreed during the day in an airstrike. He's launched now 85 drones during this 1 week period where there's supposed to be a hiatus against Ukraine, 55, which are Shahed type drones, Ukraine's Air Force said. Putin breaks the ceasefire and in a barbaric attack is now attacking the power plants in the dead of winter. What is Donald Trump going to do? What is he going to say? Is he going to do anything, any more sanctions, anything to punish Putin, who's playing him like a fiddle? Amazingly, the federal judge who's presiding over the Luigi Mangione murder of the health insurance CEO said that the federal government is screwed up and that they're not allowed to seek the death penalty against him. It's another embarrassment for Pam Bondi's Department of Justice and Donald Trump's Department of Justice. How about this, folks? Donald Trump has sued the IRS and the Treasury Department for $10 billion for supposedly leaking his tax returns before the 2020 election. I would assume there's a statute of limitations. Republican Ron Johnson reacted to this by saying, the problem is we don't have $10 billion. He said his preference would be to do a robust investigation, find out who leaked those tax returns. That's a federal crime. Charge them, punish them. But let's stop Donald Trump just filing lawsuits for billions of dollars. Vice President J.D. Vance is learning the hard way that mocking a disabled combat veteran is just not another online scourge. He took a swipe at Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, who lost both her legs as a W amputee in the Iraq War. She was a helicopter pilot. It's triggered a wave of anger from Democrats and veterans who witnessed J.D. Vance try to humiliate Tammy Duckworth and other disability advocates. Something happened to this guy. I don't know whether he hit his head exercising, but he's just really a changed person. The new federal nominee to take over the Federal Reserve Board, Mr. Warsh, was first appointed to the Fed by George W. Bush and served as a federal governor from 2006 to 2011. He has supported the need for lower interest rates, while calling for a regime change at the Fed. He has deep ties to Wall Street, currently works for billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller. Druckenmiller is close to Scott Bessent, who is the Trump's Treasury Secretary and head of the IRS, and he's led the search process for the next Fed chair. Donald Trump, don't forget, his Secretary of Treasury is the head of the IRS. Now Donald Trump is suing the IRS for $10 billion. Wouldn't surprise me whether they settle with him for a couple billion. He's also suing Jamie Dimon as well as JP Morgan Bank for cutting him off as a customer. He's suing for $20 billion there after the January 6th insurrection. Trump says that the Powell probe should go to its logical conclusion in the end, dismissing federal independent concerns. This is Trump meddling into everything. He again launched large-scale strikes against ISIS a week ago in Syria after the deadly attack killed 3 Americans last month. I'm all for that, by the way. Donald Trump continues to humiliate women, specifically Caitlin Collins, who is the lead broadcaster for CNN at night. She also covers the White House. Trump was asked a question about the Epstein documents, and he responded, you're so bad, you're the worst reporter. No wonder CNN has no ratings because of people like you. You're such a young woman. I don't think I've ever seen you smile. I've known you for 10 years. I don't ever think I've seen a smile on your face. Well, I don't think it's something that you should be laughing about, the Epstein questions and that. So, he doesn't pay a price for humiliating women. Women don't stand up to it. Men don't stand up to it. I think it's a disgrace. I think it shows that he's a small person, certainly a misogynist and a sexist. Trump said, no, we're not going to do a drawdown on troops, even though Tom Homan, who's in Minnesota, said we're going to draw down 700 ICE troops. So they're not on the same page. Trump doesn't want to appear to be weak, that he's walking away from Minnesota, but clearly that's what is happening. Trump now is mad at the GOP because there's a number of GOPers, including Tom Tillis and others in the Senate, who are calling for Kristi Noem's scalp, that she should be replaced. He thinks that Lisa Murkowski and Tom Tillis and other Republicans are scumbags, as he said, for calling for her ouster. Trump was caught on a hot mic saying that he wanted Americans to treat him like the people of North Korea treat dictator Kim Jong-un. Is that unbelievable? Remember, those are the people that clap and cry every time he comes around. Even when he said the first time he golfed, Kim Jong-un said he had 13 hole-in-ones. Trump likes that when he speaks, they jump and stand up upright. He said that's what he wants. Trump now has threatened Canada with 50% tariffs on aircraft sold in the U.S., which is expanding trade wars. This is because of their deal with electric cars that they cut with China. And an influential Russian state television pundit has suggested that Russia should target Elon Musk's Starlink satellites in space with nuclear weapons. He said that those Starlink satellites have helped Ukraine identify it. Melania documentary has cost $75 million. She got $40 million, and there was $35 million set aside for the advertising. Seems to be doing well in the theaters, but we're not sure it's going to ultimately generate enough money to make it profitable. But I don't think that's what Jeff Bezos was doing. I think Jeff Bezos was sucking up to the administration. Today, the Washington Post announced that it's terminating 300 of its senior staff, reporters and employees. This comes on the heels of last year. They had a mass layoff. The Washington Post is going to go under. Jeff Bezos clearly doesn't know how to run a newspaper. A judge hands Trump's 5th loss in his effort to halt offshore wind projects. The court ruled that construction can start on a wind farm off the coast of New York. That's the problem, is Trump's ordered all these wind farms and solar farms to no longer be approved. Greg Bavino was caught on video ordering ICE agents to make arrests in Minnesota because he said, "This is our effing city." He's now been removed, and we haven't heard from him in a greater part of the week. President Trump has declared a national emergency concerning Cuba, creating a new mechanism to impose tariffs on all imports from any country that provides Cuba with oil. Trump's chief spy chief has potentially locked in to being a defendant in a very explosive whistleblower complaint. This is against Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence. We don't know what the complaint is against her. It's mired in secrecy, but it's described as posing, quote, grave damage to national security. It's filed by an intelligence official. So that's where it is. Ed Martin, who was originally the D.C. prosecutor appointed, now he's been replaced by Gene Piero. He was put in the Justice Department to deal with its one-time weaponization chief, as well as dealing with some other targeted prosecutions that Donald Trump wanted. He was kicked out of the Justice Department by Todd Blanche. This guy, Ed Martin, dealt with pardons, and Trump has faced a lot of scrutiny with pardons. So they finally got rid of this guy. Nancy Mace, the New Yorker, just did an unbelievable piece against her. It said in the article that she has brought alcohol to work. This came from her staff, that she's had her staff clean her house and do housework for her. Nancy Mace has clearly lost it. Some of these staff members have said that she is not mentally all there. A federal judge on Tuesday appeared receptive to the claim brought by Mark Kelly that he wants an injunction issued, that Pete Hegseth's retaliation against him for his protected speech of when he said that soldiers do not have to follow illegal orders definitely impacts violations of the First Amendment. U.S. District Judge Richard Leon is considering whether to issue a preliminary injunction against Hegseth that he wants to reopen Senator Kelly's military retirement grade, bust him down in a rank, and take away his pension. Again, I talked about that the company at Washington Post has laid off 30% of their employees. Joe Brady is the new coach of the Buffalo Bills. He was their offensive coordinator. He's a young guy, started out at LSU. They won the championship with Ed O'Gearon and Joe Burrow. He went 2 years. He was the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. He said some things in his press conference that we know all football coaches do, but they never really talk about it. For instance, Philip Rivers has 10 kids. What are the odds that he made every single birth for his 10 kids, especially if it happened during, game prep, game week? Mike McDonald, who's the new offensive coordinator for the San Diego Chargers, said he only sees his kids 30 minutes a day. Joe Brady told the story in his press conference that he missed the birth of his son because of a football game. We know all coaches do it, but it's never said, and it really didn't come across well. Look at Andy Reid. He's a Mormon. Both of his kids have had legal problems and have drug problems. The problem is these coaches then put them on their staff when they're older, these kids, like Belichick has done, trying to reestablish a relationship with them because they missed out on so much time with them. Bo Nix had an ankle injury and wasn't able to play in the AFC Championship game. And this week, Sean Payton came out and just kicked him under the bus and said, basically, I didn't know he had that many ankle surgeries. And it turns out that Bo Nix has very fragile ankles that are susceptible to breaking. And Bo Nix was pretty upset that Sean Payton, his coach, was talking about his HIPAA information on national TV. And the reason is because he's due for a big contract. Same way with Bryce Harper with the Carolina Panthers. He's due for a big contract. And the question is, are these organizations willing to pay these quarterbacks the big money, whether it's Bo Nix, who certainly had 2 great years, a rookie year last year and this year. Cooper Flagg is now the face of the Dallas Mavericks. He was even when Anthony Davis was there. He had 49 points, the most by ever by an NBA rookie. Carlos Alvarez has now won the youngest man to win the Grand Slam at 22 years old. He's got, I believe, 7 majors already. He and Sinner are going to just absolutely destroy Djokovic's record of 24 Grand Slam. Joker beat Sinner in the Open semis, but he just can't win any more majors. Lindsey Vonn is injured. She had a great story. She's had a great year. She has a partially replaced knee. I have 2 fully replaced knees. And I'm skiing better than I ever have, which is amazing. She decided that she was going to go back to skiing at 42 years old. She's done a great job. She won a World Cup event. She took second. Every race she did this year, she was on the podium except one where she took 4th. She was airlifted last week from Switzerland, where she crashed and got entangled in the rope fence along the side of the ski run. She has a torn ACL, her other one, as well as bone bruises and everything. And she announced that she's still going to try to compete, which is amazing. Anthony Davis was traded to the Washington Wizards, and the Washington Wizards traded away their star players. Chris Paul, who was with the LA Clippers, was traded to the Raptors, but he most likely will be released. Kristaps Porzingis was transferred and traded to the Warriors from the Atlanta Hawks for Kuzmingo. Sanford and Son star Lamont, who was played by Grady DeMond Wilson, died at 79. That was one of my favorite shows in the 70s. I loved Jeffersons. I loved Sanford and Son. And I loved All in the Family with Archie Bunker. Lou Holtz has entered hospice care, former coach of USC, national championship with Notre Dame. Paul George of my beloved 76ers. I don't like Paul George. They shouldn't have paid him $212 million for a 4-year guaranteed contract last year. He's suspended 25 games for violating the NBA's drug policy in a major blow to the Sixers. He hasn't even played in half of the games. Donald Trump said on Sunday that he's going to move to close the Kennedy Center, Performing Arts Center, for 2 years. They've lost so many scheduled events, whether it's the opera or the symphony, that he said that we might as well close it down, and he's going to rebuild the Kennedy Center. Notice I'm not calling it the Trump Kennedy Center because I don't recognize that name. It's only Congress that can do that. Jill Biden's ex-husband was charged with first-degree murder of his new wife, which is shocking. Chuck Negron, who was a member of the Three Dog Night, he died at 83 years old. Mickey Lolich, who was pitched with the Mets and the Detroit Tigers in the 60s and 70s, runner-up for Cy Young, he died at 83. So now let me go to some of the questions that we have. Valerie Hallery said Mace has an allegation against her in the Epstein documents. Wow, I didn't realize that, Valerie. Wonder what it is. That's a really interesting thing. Let's look at some of the questions that we have. Casey Odell said, EB, what are your thoughts on some of the Trump-specific Epstein documents being released and then quickly taken off site? It's just amateur hour at the Justice Department, Casey. The way that Todd Blanche is handled and Pam Bondi has handled the congressional law that required all these documents to be turned over at 12/31 has been a joke. Let's see here. Robin Henderson Tucker said, I enjoyed listening to this week's Cup of Justice. I have a follow-up question. She said, I completely agree and understand journalists' freedom of speech, but wanted to know if journalists like Don Lemon have special immunity regarding private property and trespass. Well, what happened is he's being charged with interfering with the freedom of association of religion and interfering with church activities. I don't believe he had. I believe that he was covering it. I don't believe that he egged it on. Um, it's true that the pastor is an ICE agent, but the congregation does have a right to worship in peace. Um, I think some of the victims, Jan Combs, should sue for having their information released by the Justice Department. And I think that some of these people should be prosecuted. I think Prince Andrew should be prosecuted, and some of these other people. Um, I don't understand why the Senate won't open up any investigations. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Valerie Hallery said, go to Justice Department Gov, search EFT A01660668. She shows up with James Bolger, according to this victim. James Bolger, is that Whitey Bulger, I wonder, who was an FBI informant for all those years? So I hope you enjoyed the weekly update. It was a little shorter than usual. I'm glad I was able to do it here from Colorado. I appreciate everybody listening. Supposed to have another bomb cyclone hit the East Coast this week. And with frigid temperatures, I remember on Sunday when we left North Carolina, it was colder in North Carolina and South Carolina than it is here in Colorado. But a bad week skiing is better than a big week doing nothing. Valerie raises a good point. She's thinking that Epstein may be a confidential informant for the government as well. Could be true. So everybody take care. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Speak to you next week.